A tragic accident ended the life of an ordinary graduate student, but death wasn't the end. When she opened her eyes, she found herself inside a romance novel, as Syria Stern, the villainess doomed to die. Recalling Syria's grim fate at the hands of two furious male leads, she knew she had little time to change her story. She awoke in the arms of Ruch, one of those very men. Amused by her reaction, he played with her hair. "Why are you making that face?" he asked. "Don't tell me you're thinking about that wretch, Callus Hanaton." Callus, once Syria's fiancé, had abandoned her for the novel's heroine. Now he knelt beneath the moonlight, his voice filled with regret. "Syria, what must I do?" he asked. "Tell me what it takes to win you back." His sincerity wavered her resolve, but she refused to be fooled again. Meanwhile, the female lead entered her room, smiling. "I'd love to see you in your wedding dress," she said. Syria hesitated. This world was not unfolding as she remembered. Could she survive in a story where everything had changed? A distant memory surfaced. Before her reincarnation, a mysterious woman had asked, "Do you want to live?" Now, given a second chance, Syria had one goal: rewrite her fate before it was too late. The grand palace of the empire shimmered under the afternoon sun as nobles gathered, their whispers filled with excitement. The focus of their murmurs stood on the terrace, Lena, the saint who had descended from the heavens. "The future of the empire is already looking bright," one noblewoman gushed. "A true blessing," another added. A young noblewoman smirked, gesturing toward the terrace. "Oh, isn't that your fiancé beside her, Lady Syria?" Syria's emerald eyes flickered with annoyance as she watched Callus drape his jacket over Lena's shoulders. "They've certainly grown close," the noblewoman added with amusement. "Callus, you idiot. Our wedding is only a week away." Syria gritted her teeth. "I could storm down there and rip his hair out, but there are too many eyes on me." Instead, she forced a smile and set down her glass with unnecessary force. "Oh my, have you yet to recover from your cold, my lady?" Her maid, Yulia, fussed. "I'll prepare some medicine for you later." Syria tensed at the sudden presence behind her. "Your Grace?" she stammered, bowing. Grand Duke Ruch's piercing ice-blue eyes assessed her coolly. "If you stay out in the cold and collapse, your meddlesome fiancé will no doubt summon a high priest," he remarked. Syria sighed. "My apologies, Your Grace." Rauch's gaze shifted briefly to Callus and Lena before he turned away. "The saint is to be escorted to the high church immediately. I don't want any more disturbances in my palace." Syria swallowed. But Your Grace!" Her protest died as she clenched her fists. He might seem indifferent now, but soon, just like in the novel, he would fall for Lena. "This isn't my world." Syria was merely a character in a romance novel about Lena, a dimension-jumping heroine adored by every male lead. And the villainess who met a gruesome fate? Syria Stern. A woman of power and prestige who wielded the title of Stern, yet spent her days in excess and cruelty. Her reputation was beyond repair. If you asked 100 people about her, 150 would call her a troublemaker. And now she was trapped in Syria's body. "I don't want to die." Why did I have to end up as Syria? Determined to change her fate, she had one goal: eliminate all of Syria's enemies before Lena took over the story. Syria recalled a time when Callus had been injured. "You once tried to take my arm off," he muttered as she applied medicine. "What are you up to now?" "Stop squirming, Callus," she rolled her eyes. "I'm treating you." "Where did you get these herbs?" he asked warily. "From the cliffs below the church." His eyes widened. "You went there alone?" "Obviously." Silence hung between them before he finally muttered, "What's brought on this change in you?" A faint blush dusted his cheeks. From that moment on, their relationship shifted. One afternoon, Callus stood before her, conflicted. "Syria, why don't we get married?" Syria froze. In the original story, Callus had ended his own life after losing everything. If she could change that ending, maybe she could save herself too, so she agreed. Back in the present, Syria walked across the terrace, her mind made up. Without me in the way, won't their love story unfold more smoothly? I will avoid getting involved with them at all costs. But just days later, Lena appeared before her, smiling radiantly. "Oh, Callus is intended. It's such a pleasure to meet you." Syria's breath hitched. "What the?" "I'm Lena," she giggled, gripping Syria's hand. "I've been longing to meet you." Syria forced a smile, panic settling in. "I said I didn't want anything to do with them." Syria was taken aback when Lena, the so-called saint from another world, approached her with excitement. Despite Syria's efforts to avoid her, Lena cheerfully inquired about her wedding dress fitting. Syria, uneasy about Lena's familiarity with her fiancé, Callus, forced a polite response. The situation escalated when Lena expressed a desire to watch Syria try on her dress. Before Syria could react, Begonia, the esteemed designer, firmly reminded Lena that such events were private. Lena, embarrassed, apologized, citing unfamiliarity with the world's customs. However, Syria couldn't shake the feeling that events were unfolding exactly like the novel she remembered. Later, Callus shocked Syria by suggesting they replace Begonia, citing her harshness toward Lena. When Syria pointed out Lena's inappropriate remarks, Callus defended her, revealing that he had been appointed as Lena's protector. His casual use of Lena's name only fueled Syria's unease. This was how their bond had strengthened in the original story. Though frustrated, she masked her emotions, knowing she had to tread carefully to change her fate. That evening, just as Syria and Callus shared a rare quiet moment, a night interrupted. Lena's divine powers had gone out of control again, and Callus rushed to her side without hesitation. Watching him leave, Syria began to understand why the original villainess had acted as she did. Determined to secure her standing, Syria diligently fulfilled her duties as a stern, ensuring the protection of House Burke's lands. During an inspection of the beast's tomb, she encountered Elliot, the knight commander, who showed concern for her health. Before she could respond, Duke Rausch arrived, his cold tone demanding her attention. Syria braced herself. Yet another challenge awaited. Syria hesitated, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Pardon? Did I do something wrong? Rausch's piercing gaze locked onto hers. What possible reason could you have for coming to the lake in winter while suffering from a cold? She took a steadying breath, willing herself to stay composed. I appreciate your concern, but it's not severe. And this, she gestured to the lake. This is my duty as a stern. Rausch crossed his arms, unimpressed. Since when have you taken your duties so seriously? Or is this just an attempt to weaken yourself further so you might... He paused, his voice sharp. Catch your fiancé's attention. Syria stiffened at the insinuation. Your Grace? She asked carefully. I have no such intention. Besides, no matter how sick I become, my betrothed would never cause a disturbance in your palace. Rausch's gaze darkened. Is it because of that saint? Syria's breath hitched. What is that supposed to? Is Lord Callus having a liaison with her? Rausch's words cut through the air like a blade. Syria clenched her fists. How? How could he say such a thing? As they stepped deeper into the cold forest, Rausch turned to Elliot. Have you completed the inspection? Thanks to Lady Syria's efforts, we finished much faster than expected. Without her, it would have taken half a day longer, Elliot praised. Syria felt a flicker of pride, but quickly observed Rausch's silent expression. Who does he think he is? Acting all high and mighty, she thought, then sighed. Well, I suppose he is the male lead, and damn handsome to boot. Why does he have to be such a pain? Rausch glanced at her briefly before turning away. Then let's return. Yes, Your Grace, Elliot saluted before departing. Syria hesitated, then followed Rausch. We nearly made eye contact. We mustn't allow our precious stern's health to deteriorate further, Rausch remarked before walking ahead. Syria blinked. What's this? After all those sharp remarks? Back at the palace, she sat deep in thought. Does he like me more than I thought? She quickly shook off the idea. Still, it's probably best to avoid him. There's something about him. He's the scariest of them all. Not to mention the way he talks. I just want the wedding to wrap up so I can leave this place. She exhaled slowly. There was only one reason she remained at House Burke's palace. Sterns, considered holy figures, were required to perform certain rites in specific locations, including wedding vows. House Burke's dominion guarded the frozen lake, one of those sacred sites. Clenching her fists, she muttered, Stupid book. I wanted to avoid having the wedding here at all costs. Mostly because this is where Lena and Rausch get married at the end of the story. Syria's thoughts faltered. As it turns out, Lena was actually a stern too. I know she's the main character, but still. Isn't this a bit much? A saint and a stern? No wonder the original Syria was so jealous of her. The truth wouldn't be revealed until the end. If I just get married and quietly make my exit, I should be fine. My lady? A familiar voice called. Syria turned, her expression brightening. Bibi. Abigail Orion, her escort knight, had returned. Syria grasped her hands affectionately. How was the beast expedition? Did you make it back in one piece? Were you injured? Bibi chuckled. Please, my lady, take a breath. Syria eyed her suspiciously. You didn't anyone, did you? She whispered. The knight smirked. I've told you, I only touch criminals. Everything went well, though I did miss you. My armor was as cold as ice without you. Syria sighed. I knew I should have gone along. Stearns wielded a special magic called star armor, which protected knights from magical poisoning. Without them, knights exposed to demonic energy risked losing body heat and freezing to death inside their armor. Bibi draped her coat over Syria's shoulders. We should hurry inside. You're liable to catch a cold. Syria hesitated. Rooch said almost the same thing earlier. For now, at least, I'm still the precious Stern, she thought. Let's go in, Bibi. I want to hear all about what happened, she said with a small smile. But inwardly, Syria knew she had to solidify her usefulness before Lena realized what she truly was. Meanwhile, from her window, Lena watched Syria and Bibi. She's changed a great deal this past year, a butler commented. She's become much closer to Marquise Hannington. Lena turned to him, her expression unreadable. Why does Callus's fiancé visit the glacier every day? Because she's a Stern. Only Sterns can purify the lake's barrier, he explained. She's earned quite a reputation for her diligence. Lena's gaze sharpened. I envy her. Pardon? The butler looked tense. You're already considered a saint, my lady. But doesn't Sterna sound more dashing? Lena mused. The glacier can only be purified by a Stern's magic, which makes everyone so interested in her. Even with my divine power, I can't do that. The butler offered a reassuring smile. You'll have your moment. A splendid welcoming reception will soon be held in your honor. Though, of course, you'll need to master proper etiquette first. He continued. Besides, not just anyone can be a Stern. They must be born with divine power on a Wednesday in winter. Each bears a star somewhere on their body. But Lena wasn't listening anymore. She simply stared out the window, her expression darkening. Stern, she murmured. I am envious. Syria sat quietly as her handmaiden attended to her. Your birthday is approaching, Lady Syria. Here, for your cold, the maid said, offering a spoonful of syrup. Syria blinked in surprise. The reminder caught her off guard. Ah, that's right, I've been so busy that I'd forgotten. She had been born on a wintry Wednesday, a significant detail in her life. Only those meeting specific conditions could be bestowed with the title of Stern. An old rhyme had always stuck with her. A child born on Monday has a lovely face. A child born on Tuesday is filled with the God's grace. A child born on Wednesday is full of sorrow, but a child born on Thursday brims with all the love of tomorrow. It had always felt unfair. In the original novel, she had thought the rhyme unjust when she heard it in church, but after awakening as a Stern, she embraced her wintry Wednesday birth with pride. Her 15th birthday had marked her official awakening. A small star had appeared on her ivory neck, signaling her new identity. From that moment, she abandoned her family name, Kelladon, and embraced her new title, worsening the already strained relationship with her family. As she reflected, her maid's voice pulled her back to the present. My lady, the saint has taken a great interest in Constellation Steel. It's becoming concerning. Syria frowned. It's dangerous for her to approach it before her powers stabilize. Lena has a naturally inquisitive nature, the maid explained. Syria sighed. That sounds exactly like a typical main character. In the original story, Lena had awakened as a Stern after touching a Constellation Steel monolith. Syria tried not to dwell on it. Once the wedding was over, she planned to leave for House Hannington and let the rest of the story play out. At least, that was the plan. But why do I keep running into Rauch? Earlier, Syria had wandered through the Green Garden Vault, admiring the silver laurel boughs. No matter how many times she saw them, they never lost their beauty. If a Stern were a plant, wouldn't they look just like this? The silver laurel played a vital role in maintaining the glacier's barrier. Its branches strengthened and purified it, acting as a substitute for a Stern when one wasn't available. Should I ask Bibi to come with me today? Before she could decide, a familiar, deep voice interrupted her thoughts. You seem to be in high spirits, Lady Syria. Syria turned abruptly. Your Grace! Oh, greetings! She barely had time to collect herself before Rauch spoke again. Are you visiting the frozen lake again today? Oh, yes, I am, she stammered. Rauch studied her for a moment, then casually picked up a silver laurel branch. I'm not sure I understand. Pardon? As far as I'm aware, your chambers have been well prepared. Do you find them lacking? Syria hesitated. What is he talking about? Otherwise, I see no reason for you to visit the glacier with such persistence. Ah. Rauch tilted his head slightly. Isn't your recent diligence because you want something? Actually, that's not exactly. Every time you visit my palace, you cause an uproar when something isn't to your liking, he continued, his expression unreadable. Over 100 servants were left bedridden after serving you. Syria stiffened. Come on, Syria, think. Which means I must work even harder to make up for their suffering, she said quickly, looking tense. Rauch's lips curled slightly. You truly are an enigma. His gaze lingered on her before he added, It may be something of a pity when you leave for House Hanaton. A pity? To whom? To him. Syria wasn't sure what to make of that. Later, back in her room, she sat with a cup of tea, still mulling over his words. Seriously, what is going on? Just then, her maids rushed in, their excitement breaking her thoughts. My lady, your wedding gifts have arrived. Syria examined the lavish offerings. This sapphire is from Marquis Hanaton himself. Such clarity, and the color is so rich. One maid remarked. A pity, huh? Rauch's words echoed in her mind. Hearing something like that from the male lead almost felt like a guarantee that she'd make it through everything. For the first time, she felt further from the doomed ending she had feared. She turned her attention back to her gifts. Here, my lady, the bracelet you asked for has been prepared, a maid said, handing her a small box. Callus had given her so much. She wanted to return the favor with something meaningful before the ceremony. You're giving that to Marquis Callus, aren't you? Oh my, how romantic! Another maid chimed in. Syria smiled. In the original story, Lena discovers a magic crystal mine. Until then, these were considered rare and precious gems. Callus will surely appreciate it. Before she could dwell on it further, a breathless maid burst into the room. My lady, a catastrophe! Syria tensed. Lady Lena? She collapsed after touching the constellation's steel monument. Syria's heart pounded. What? And the monument itself, it turned transparent and began to shine. Syria's breath caught. That could only mean one thing. A new Stern had awakened. Syria watched in disbelief as Lena winced in pain, tended to by a nun. This was far too early in the story for her awakening as a Stern. In the original tale, this moment had happened much later. Rauch entered the room, asking about Lena's condition. The doctor assured him that the worst had passed, thanks to Marquis Hanaton's presence. Syria glanced at Callus, who stood beside Lena's bed, completely unaware of her presence. A high priest confirmed Lena's awakening as a Stern, stating that she would surely repay any kindness shown to her. Rauch turned to Syria, questioning whether she had experienced the same pain during her own awakening. She hesitated before admitting that her power had never been as immense as Lena's. Rauch deduced that Lena must have known she possessed divine power, yet she had still insisted on touching Constellation steel, causing this commotion. When asked why Lena would do such a thing, her butler suggested it was out of admiration for Syria. This caught Syria off guard. Why would Lena admire her? In the original story, Lena's awakening had been accidental and nearly fatal. But now, had she touched the Constellation steel intentionally? Lenin, Rauch's aide, announced that Lena had regained consciousness. Rauch showed little interest, dismissing any need to visit her, though he eventually agreed, if only for the sake of diplomacy. Inside Lena's chamber, the first words out of her mouth were, Callus! He immediately took her hand, reassuring her. Syria observed in silence, her emotions stirring as she clenched her skirt. Bibi whispered an offer to deal with Callus, but Syria remained quiet. Unmoved by the emotional scene, Rauch swiftly declared that Lena would be sent back to the High Church as soon as she could move. His bluntness shocked the room. Callus protested, arguing that it was unfair to treat her that way. Rauch, unimpressed, reminded him that his own fiancée was unwell, and his concern for another woman might cause misunderstandings. Syria flinched, realizing that the one truly upset by Callus's actions wasn't her. It was Roosh. For so long, she had forced herself to endure, suppressing her emotions to avoid the tragic fate from the novel. Roosh extended his hand. My lady, shall we take our leave? Callus hesitated as Lena clung to him, whispering his name. Roosh's grip on Syria's hand was firm yet gentle. With a deep breath, Syria made her choice. Yes, your grace. Without looking back, she followed Roosh out of the room, leaving Callus behind. Syria walked through the hallway carrying silver laurel branches, her thoughts clouded by the previous day's events. She hadn't heard a word from Callus since. That jerk, she muttered. Lady Syria, a voice called. Startled, she turned to see Roosh approaching. Oh, your grace. His expression was unreadable, and she recalled the moment he had offered her his hand the night before. A flush crept onto her face. I never properly thanked him, she realized. Your grace, about. But he cut her off. Will you be able to inspect the lake properly after what happened yesterday? If this is just an excuse to escape, why not rest in the annex instead? Syria straightened. There's no need for concern, your grace. I will fulfill my duties as meticulously as ever. I would never take such a thing lightly. I am a stern, after all. He exhaled sharply. My lady, that isn't what I... Before he could finish, another voice interrupted. Syria? I've been looking for you. Syria tensed as Callus Hanaton entered from outside. He strode forward, completely ignoring Rausch's presence. Rausch's expression darkened. Am I invisible to you, Marquis Hanaton? Callus hesitated before offering a curt nod. Pardon my rudeness, your grace. I couldn't find my betrothed anywhere and spent much of the day searching. But I never expected to find you both here in such a secluded spot. Syria, come along. I do not recall granting you permission to enter this vault. Rausch's voice turned sharp. Are you unaware that no one aside from a stern may enter without my express approval? Callus stood his ground. I'll take responsibility when I return to my own lands. If restitution is required... Rausch's eyes glinted dangerously. It isn't for you to decide your own punishment. House Burke has its own traditions. Callus frowned. Tradition? A hand should be cleaved off at the wrist. What do you say? Rausch smirked. Callus's voice tensed. I didn't realize you wanted my hand, your grace. Are you keen on provoking a war between our houses? Rausch remained cold. You seem to be the one inviting war, Marquise. Syria watched in horror. Were they really about to wage war over this? In the middle of winter? If it is war you desire, Burke will gladly answer. Rausch shot back. You are the one seeking conflict, not I, Callus retorted. Very well. I shall have an urgent dispatch sent to your estate immediately. Syria's heart pounded. What is happening? Panicked, she stepped forward. Your grace. My intended was discourteous, but waging war over this would be cruel to the knights already burdened with guarding the glacier in winter. I entreat you, she pleaded, gripping Rausch's sleeve. Please show the same benevolence that you have granted this stern. My betrothed will vow never to act so disrespectfully again. Callus flinched at her words. Rausch's sharp gaze flickered before turning to him. Marquise, you have a most excellent fiancé, he said before walking past Callus, leaving the hallway. Crisis averted, Syria thought with relief. But just as she relaxed, Callus stepped toward her. Syria? A word? Without answering, she walked outside. Syria! Stop! I asked to speak with you. He followed after her. How can you run off like this? You took hold of the Archduke's clothing so indiscreetly, and now you're acting rashly just because you're angry? Syria stopped in her tracks, trembling slightly before turning to him. You mean to say I'm the one behaving improperly? She asked coldly. Callus sighed. Please try to understand. Lena is ill. She is a delegate of the gods, stranded in an unfamiliar world with no one to rely on but me. Can't you see that? Syria's voice was steady. I am being understanding. Is this how you show it? Getting angry, spending time with another man, and refusing to look me in the eye? He stepped closer, taking her hand gently. Syria clenched her fists. You did the same with the saint. That's different, he snapped. Lena is infirm. Yes, it was different, she cut in icily, yanking her hand free. Because at least I didn't call the Archduke by name in front of my intended. Let go of my hand. Syria, listen. Callus pleaded softly, still holding her wrist. She had enough. Yanking her hand away forcefully, her fingers collided with the rough bark of a tree. Syria, he called, looking bewildered. She cradled her stinging hand, her voice sharp. I told you to let go. Syria. Callus looked stricken. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. If I were you, Callus, I would have broken our engagement and proposed to Saint Lena instead. Callus's eyes widened. What? Syria didn't respond. Her mind reeled with memories of the original story. Callus had once killed Syria in his desperation to win Lena's love, only to take his own life when it failed. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't know anything. Callus hesitated. Syria, I didn't mean to make you cry. He pulled her into a hesitant embrace. I'm sorry. Let's leave for my estate after the wedding. Once Lena recovers, I won't see her again. I swear I will be a faithful husband to you. Syria wiped her tears. Everything would work out. Trusting him was the safest choice. Just don't be late for our wedding, she said quietly. Callus smiled. I never would. That evening, Callus met with Lena. This will be the last time we address each other by name, he told her. Lena stiffened. Because of your fiancé? Callus nodded. Lena sighed. Viscount Ison already spoke to me about this, so from now on we're simply Marquis Hannington and Saint Lena? That is correct, Lena bit her lip. You are such a dear friend. If only we had met sooner. Her gaze dropped to his wrist. I've never seen that bracelet before. Callus glanced down. A gift from Syria. Lena frowned slightly. I would love to be friends with her. Callus's expression tensed. It is improper to call someone by their first name without familiarity. Lena's composure cracked. Etiquette, etiquette, etiquette. Do you know how much I have restrained myself? Lena, Callus reached for her. Tears fell from her eyes. Archduke Burke wants me to return to the High Church. I'm terrified. She sank to her knees, sobbing. You said you would protect me. Was that a lie? Callus hesitated before kneeling beside her. Lena, no more tears. She sniffled. Callus, I want to visit the glacier. He blinked. Why? Now that I'm a Stern, I can help Syria. That will improve our relationship, won't it? Callus hesitated. Your health. I'm going, Lena interrupted. Callus exhaled. Very well, but we must be quick. Lena beamed. Later, in his study, Roosh stood by the window. You're telling me they left the premises and all contact with them has been lost? Yes, Your Grace, Lenin confirmed. They were caught in a blizzard. Roosh's fist tightened. That Marquis. His voice turned icy. Does he intend to let Lady Syria die? Lenin tried to reason with him, but Roosh was unmoved. A Stern's wedding was critical, and any disruption could have deadly consequences. Looking out the window, he spotted Syria among the search party. What is Lady Syria doing outside? She must be worried about her fiancé, Lenin suggested. Rush's eyes narrowed. Inform her she is not permitted to leave the palace. Outside, Syria stood at the gates, desperate. I must find Callus before the ceremony. Bibi approached her. We had to halt the search. The blizzard worsened the closer we got to the glacier. Syria trembled. He'll return, won't he? Bibi squeezed her hand. The Archduke sent a message. Even if I have to drag him back myself, your wedding will proceed as planned. Syria flushed. He really said that? Bibi nodded. His expression was terrifying. At a distant cabin, Callus gritted his teeth. The storm is too dangerous, Lena said, holding his hand. But the ceremony. Can't you postpone it? Callus shook his head. A Stern's wedding cannot be delayed. Lena's protest stopped when he coughed blood. His eyes widened in realization. The wedding, it's already begun. At the palace, tension filled the hall. Marquis Hannington hasn't returned? A Stern wedding without a groom? What a disgrace. Syria stood alone at the altar, her body trembling. Blood dripped from her lips. Gasps filled the room. Her divine power is going berserk. A high priest stepped forward. Only those who attended the commitment ceremony may touch her. Gather all the Stern insignia. We must stabilize her power. Syria's mind spiraled. Was this her fate after all? All she wanted was to live. At that moment, Roosh stormed in. Your Grace, you must not touch her, the priest warned. Roosh ignored them. He strode to Syria, his voice steady. Syria Stern, get a hold of yourself. You cannot die. Syria gasped, barely conscious. Roosh's presence anchored her. His next words cut through the chaos. Wouldn't it be too unjust for you to perish this way? Roosh asked. Yes. Perishing like this would be far too pitiful, Your Grace, Syria murmured through her pain. Roosh looked startled as her hand slipped from his arm, and she collapsed onto the floor. Prepare for a commitment ceremony at once, he ordered the priest. Gasps filled the grand hall. The priests exchanged nervous glances. Your Grace. But that would mean the Sterns' wedding shall proceed as scheduled. Syria Stern will be saved by whatever means necessary, Roosh declared, his expression firm. In her unconscious state, Syria dreamed. She ran through darkness, her mind gripped by terror. Please, don't kill me like this. I want to live. Spare me. I beg you, she pleaded. A voice called her name, pulling her back to consciousness. Syria Stern. Roosh's voice was softer than she expected. Are you awake? He sat beside her bed. She swallowed hard, struggling to sit up. Your Grace, she mumbled as he gently wiped a tear from her eye. Roosh furrowed his brows. I cannot understand you, Lady Syria. What could you have dreamed about to make you cry? Was I crying? She asked, confused. Would I have woken you otherwise? He replied. Syria hesitated. So you were the one calling my name. That's right. What were you dreaming of? She exhaled shakily. I was dying. A silence stretched between them before he asked, Are you afraid to die? Syria looked away. Isn't everyone? His lips twitched slightly. After all your reckless behavior, I assumed you wouldn't fear such things. Her heart tightened. And what of Callus? Roosh's expression darkened. He placed a cool, damp towel against her forehead and rubbed it firmly. What are you doing? Do you have amnesia? He asked. Do you really not remember what transpired during the ceremony? Memories surged through her mind. She recalled the church, the priest's solemn voice as Roosh carried her in his arms. Therefore, I command the head of House Burke, Archduke Roosh Burke, to swear an eternal oath to Syria Stern, recipient of the constellation's blessing, the priest had declared. She had lost consciousness before hearing the rest. Syria sucked in a breath. Are we, husband and wife, Your Grace? Roosh nodded. Indeed, the head of House Burke couldn't suffer the disgrace of losing a Stern. A lump formed in her throat. Then, you knew I could die before the ceremony? Yes. Syria clenched the sheets beneath her fingers. Stern weddings are extremely strict affairs, she whispered. To prepare for the worst, the bride remains unaware of the risks, Roosh explained. But their intended is always informed. If the ceremony is interrupted, the Stern's divine power becomes ensnared, placing them both in grave danger. Her voice trembled. So Callus already knew that I could lose my life if he was late? Later that night, Callus burst into the estate. No, you mustn't, my lord. Syria's maids tried to stop him, but he pushed forward. The doors swung open as Callus Hanaton stormed in, his face contorted with desperation. Syria! The Archduke ordered that no one enter Lady Syria's chambers without his permission. The maids protested, looking frightened. Leave us, Syria said. I need to speak with Marquise Hanaton alone. The maids hesitated but obeyed. Callus turned to her, anguish in his eyes. How could you, Syria? How could you marry another man? Archduke Burke of all people. His fists clenched. Syria silenced him with a slap. Her voice was cold. Because you didn't come. You think I wanted this? She continued. This was your doing, Callus. If not for the Archduke, I would have died. Because of you. Callus paled. Syria's voice sharpened. You knew I would die if you were late, and yet you still... Her breath hitched. Wait, did you want me to perish? Is that why you were with Lena? Callus flinched. Syria, please. His voice wavered as he sank to his knees. We ran into misfortune. I didn't choose not to come. I was worried sick about you. I braved a blizzard, did everything I could to reach you, but then I collapsed just outside the door. His voice cracked. You are the only woman I've ever wanted to marry. Every word I've spoken to you has been the truth. I love you. Truly I do, he said, holding her arms gently. Syria stared at him, her heart pounding. But before she could process his words, a strange sensation coursed through her veins. She shuddered. What is this power? Her breath hitched. More importantly, how is Callus still alive? His oath had been broken. He should have suffered the same consequences as she had. Syria's eyes darkened. No, it can't be. Callus had already taken part in a ceremony pledging himself to a Stern, binding him to their lineage. This meant he could, in theory, marry any one of them. Now, he found himself in a situation where the commitment ceremony, time, and place had been arranged. Yet fate had placed another Stern within the estate. Kneeling before Syria, he clutched her hand. Did you marry Lena? Syria asked, her voice steady but sharp. Callus hesitated. Syria, he murmured, standing up. You must have, she said quickly. yanking her hand from his grasp. You're still alive, after all. The realization struck her like a cold wave. She had desperately tried to avoid the original Syria's fate, yet here she was, drowning in a different kind of misery. Her fists clenched. It hasn't been long since I first fell in love with you, she admitted, her voice wavering. But I regret wasting even that much time. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. All the effort, walking on eggshells, molding herself into the perfect fiancé, it had all been for nothing. It's just a temporary marriage, Callus insisted, just like how you temporarily married the Archduke to survive. And, Syria's voice rose, does that make a difference? She shook her head, playing the part of a charming, docile fiancé. Maybe that was leading me to ruin all along. Callus reached for her. Let's start over, Syria. We can get divorced and return to the beginning. There's still time. Time? She echoed. A hollow laugh escaped her lips. Is time really all we need? Her next words cut through the air like a blade. My feelings for you have already disappeared. She turned away. Callus grabbed her wrist. Please, let's talk. Let go, she demanded, voice trembling with anger. Syria! Callus called, his desperation clawing at the space between them. But Syria had already stepped back, shaking her head. Disgust flashed across her face. I can feel another Stern's power emanating from you, she said coldly. It's repulsive. Don't touch me. Please, Syria. A deep voice interrupted. She told you to unhand her. Ruchberg's voice cut through the hallway, sharp as a blade. Lennon stood behind him, silent but imposing. Are you deaf now as well, Marquise Hanaton? Callus tensed at the Archduke's presence. Well? Rausch pressed. Callus let go of Syria's hand. Still reeling, Syria noticed Ruch's gaze settle on her wrist. Your wound has reopened, he observed. She looked down. Blood seeped through the bandages. Yes, slightly. Ruch frowned. More than slightly. A priest should tend to it. Callus stepped forward. I shall take Syria to the priest myself, your grace. Ruch arched a brow. Why you? The two of us were in the middle of a discussion, so... Lady Syria ought to be the one making that decision, Ruch interrupted smoothly. His gaze shifted to her. Who would you prefer to accompany you? Syria hesitated, then took Ruch's arm. Callus flinched, his eyes widening in shock. It seems I am beholden to you, your grace, she said with a faint smile. Ruch's lips quirked. Beholden? Isn't that rather excessive between spouses? He led her away. Lennon, Ruch called, summon a priest to my study. Yes, your grace, Lennon replied, leaving Callus alone in the corridor, still dumbfounded. Rauch turned to Syria. For now, refrain from any vigorous movement, he instructed as they reached her chambers. After her wound was treated, Syria bowed. I shall take my leave. Do you feel better? Ruch asked. Syria hesitated, then knelt before him. I know this is belated, but... Thank you for saving me, your grace, she said softly. Rauch's eyes widened as he sprang up. What are you doing? Did you hit your head as well? No, she answered with a small smile. My head is fine. Then what is this? Well, I've only now come back to myself, so thank you for saving me. She met his gaze. This was the man she had once feared most in the story, and yet he had risked everything for her. He had wagered his first marriage, the first marriage of the sole Archduke of the Jeru Empire, to keep her alive. I will do everything in my power to repay the kindness you have shown me, she said. Please don't be concerned, your grace, she quickly added. I shall do my best not to undermine your marriage prospects. Ruch's lips curled into a smirk. Marriage prospects? Syria nodded. This is the first time a woman has ever shown concern for those, he mused, amusement flickering in his eyes. Even if you were to marry 2 or 3 times, your grace, you'd still set ladies that hearts aflame, she said earnestly. Ruch chuckled. Do you view me as some sort of lecher? Syria paled. No, not at all. No, he teased. Syria steadied herself. I intend to do my utmost as a Stern for the sake of this estate, for however long our marriage may last. Ruch studied her carefully. Why are you watching my reaction so intently? Are you afraid of me? Syria flinched. I wouldn't say that, but the way you were presented in the story was rather terrifying, she thought. Rauch smirked. In any case, hearing that you'll do your best for House Burke fills me with anticipation. Syria straightened. I will do whatever I can to live up to your expectations, your grace. Their gazes locked.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Manhwa content. See you in the next one.